Today, brothers and sisters, it's my delightful privilege and honor to present someone who is no stranger to the Mount Nebo Baptist Church family. Governor Cuomo comes from good stock, following in the footsteps of his late father, Governor Mario Cuomo, who was the governor of New York when I came to the East Coast to study at Princeton. His father left a rich legacy, not to mention a large set of shoes to fill. And I don't think, Governor, that we are ever able to adequately fill the shoes of our fathers. But I'm sure that your father is somewhere in that undiscovered country whose born no traveler returns, saying to one of the other angelic guests, "This is my beloved son, Andrew, in whom I'm well pleased." I feel this way because both of our fathers have influenced our lives by the power of their examples, his father here in New York and my father in Texas. How can we forget that famous keynote address delivered by our late governor at the 1984 Democratic National Convention entitled "A Tale of Two Cities"? I knew I'd heard that before, where he captivated the imagination of the country and challenged us to rise to our better angels. I'm sure that the words of that speech resonated with our current governor the other day as he walked through NYCHA housing and viewed the deplorable conditions that thousands of New Yorkers live in every day. I'm sure that speech was burning in your spirit, Governor Cuomo, when you were moved to commit upwards to $250 million to get started on turning things around at NYCHA. Let's give the governor a hand for that. Somebody shout, "That's leadership." Come on, say it again, that's leadership. But we ask, Mr. Governor, that you not stop there. We want you to apply that same moral clarity to ensuring that people of color participate in the tremendous economic opportunities ongoing here in the Empire State. There should be no future contracts let out on any of the mega projects without minority firms participating at every level, including prime contracts. In the spirit of your father, I know working together with the black clergy across this state from Buffalo to Brooklyn, we can realize in our lifetime that no citizen has to live in the decadent conditions presently going on at NYCHA. I know that you are concerned, Governor, and we are concerned as well as clergy. So today, we want to welcome you to our house of worship. This place called Mount Nebo, it's a very sacred place to us. And it is a place that we don't allow any and everybody to come to. But we are grateful today. We are grateful to God for all that he has done. And in the spirit of Jesus Christ, at Mount Nebo, we proclaim love, justice, mercy, and equality every Sunday. This is what we do. This is who we are. Something that I know is a part of your core religious values, as well as the policies that you put forward and will continue to put forward in the future. And so it gives me great joy, and I'm deliciously proud to introduce and to present to some our governor of the Empire State, Governor Andrew Mark Cuomo. Hear ye him.
Well, thank you. Welcome. Thank you for having me today. And first to Reverend Dr. Johnny Green, God bless you for what you do, not just for your own church, but he is a force all across the state. He is a force all across the nation for social justice. Let's give him a big round of applause. Good morning to all of you. Good morning. Happy Palm Sunday. I want to acknowledge some of my colleagues who are here. Assemblymember Inez Dickens is here, and Keith Wright is here, and Jeff Eaton from the NAACP, a great partner, is here. Pleasure to be with you. God is good all the time. I am not a member of your church, I want you to know, as a matter of full disclosure. I am a Catholic. Catholics basically believe the same teachings that Baptists believe. Yes. We just do it without the rhythm. But we try. We try. We are not as without rhythm as some of our Jewish brothers and sisters. I was just watching Mr. Chenkov here in the front row, moving to the music. It was ugly. It was ugly, I'll tell you the truth. But it is a pleasure to be back at Mount Nebo. Reverend Green is exactly right. We are both, many ways, products of our father, Reverend's father, first African microbiologist in Texas, believe it or not. I'm not smart enough to know what a microbiologist does, but you know that it was about education, it was about strength, it was about courage, it was about being a pioneer and going where no one had gone before, especially in the state of Texas. And Reverend Green embodies that strength and that courage, and we God bless him for it. Thank you, Reverend. My father, as the Reverend said, was a good governor, and I think about him a lot. We lost him 2 years ago. Been thinking about him this Easter season. You can tell a lot about a person by the way he lived and about the way he died. And I was thinking the past few weeks about the way my father passed. He was deteriorating over time, and he called me before Thanksgiving, and he said, I want you to come, I want to talk to you. And I went to his apartment, and he was in his bed, and he had home care aides. God bless them. God bless 1199 for what they do. Those people do the Lord's work. And he had had his ups and downs in life. He had been a great governor. He then lost in 1994, and he was down for a while. I then won for Attorney General in 2006, and my father saw that as his redemption. We're at the table one day, and he's talking about how people, when they go in the voting booth, they really only look at the last name, Cuomo. So he believed my victory as Attorney General was really his victory because they were voting for Cuomo. They didn't look at the first name. But he called me before Thanksgiving, and he said, you know, pal, I don't want to live like this. This is not who I am. My father was a very prideful, very dignified man. And he had gotten to the point where they had to help him to do just human functions. And this is not who he was, and it's not the situation he wanted to exist in. And I said, Pop, Thanksgiving is coming in just a few days. Whole family's going to come together. They all want to be there with you. The kids are all coming in. You have to be here for Thanksgiving. And he said, okay, and we had Thanksgiving, and it was beautiful. And a couple of weeks later, my mother called and said, your father wants to see you. And I came back, and he said, I told you I don't want to live like this. It's not who I am. It's not how I want to live life. I said, Pop, Christmas is coming up in a couple of weeks. And Christmas, the whole family is going to come here, and this is a special time, and we have to be together for Christmas. And he said, I understand. Christmas came and left, called me the day after Christmas. And he said, I want to see you. I said, well, I'll get there in a couple of days. He said, no, you come down today, and you see me. And he was my father. He didn't care if I was with the Pope. I was going to leave him and go see him. And he said, we had a conversation, and I don't want to fight with you, but I'm not comfortable living this way. I said, Papa, next week is January 1st, New Year's Day. I get inaugurated for governor on January 1st. I need you with me. I need you to help me on that speech. He said, baloney, you don't listen to me on this speech. You haven't listened to me for years on this speech. You don't need me for the speech. I said, no, I need you, and I need you to be there when I get sworn in as governor. And he wouldn't answer me. And I knew what that meant. So I said, Papa, look me in the eyes and tell me you will be here when I get inaugurated as governor. And I want you to promise me. And you have never broken a promise to me. And he looked me in the eye. First time I saw my father cry. Made me cry. And he said, I will be here when you get inaugurated. I said, you promise me? He said, I promise you. That morning I called him on the way to the inauguration, and he said he was going to listen to the speech. One of my sisters was going to come with a cell phone and hold it up, and she was going to let him hear the speech. I went, I gave the speech. I then got in the plane, went to Buffalo to give a second version of the speech. As I'm in Buffalo in the middle of the speech, I see the person who's with me in the back of the room take a phone call. And I see him hang up the phone and shake his head. And I knew what that meant. And I stopped the speech. My father heard the speech, and he passed away on inaugural day, January 1. That's who he was. That's who he was. He was true to his word. He believed in dignity and life and was strong and courageous. And I believe the Spirit lives. I believe that's what we're celebrating now with Palm Sunday and Easter. And I believe the Spirit lives in different ways. And I believe His Spirit lives in me. And I believe part of my legacy is to carry on that work. The Reverend mentioned his speech at the '84 Democratic Convention, Tale of Two Cities. It was his gospel. And what it said is there are two societies, there are two Americas. And one is for the rich and the white, and one is for the poor and the minorities. And if we don't acknowledge that duality, if we don't acknowledge that reality, then we are kidding ourselves. And this nation has moved forward with one society at the expense and the cost of another society. That's what the Tale of Two Cities said. He said that in 1984. We had the Ronald Reagan administration. That was very effective at helping the rich and cutting aid to the poor. But that speech is actually more accurate today than it was in 1984. Because this federal government is actually worse than what they did in 1984. This federal government is obvious and blatant and crude in the way they do it. Yeah. They advocate division. They did a tax cut. Majority of the benefits go to the richest 1% of Americans. They never blushed. That's how they think it should be done. Yeah. They're bringing racial division, religious division, like a meat cleaver right through this country. And they don't even apologize for it. We have more neo-Nazi groups springing up, more anti-Semitism, more racism. They had that Charlottesville rally with the white supremacists. And they said afterwards, well, there were good people on both sides. No, there are no good white supremacists, Mr. President, by definition. They split us by race, this war against immigrants. It's the immigrants, it's the people who look different. They're the problem. People with a different skin color, people who speak a different language. Talk about hypocrisy. We're all immigrants to this nation. Unless, Mr. President, is an Apache, a Sioux, a Navajo, an Iroquois, then he is an immigrant to this nation. So what do we do about it? What we do, we go forward on two tracks. One, we have to change the federal government. We have to have a Congress that will stop the federal government. We have to change the Congress. We have to do that in November. I'm not going to say anything more about that because Reverend Green said, don't get too political, Governor, and I said, okay. So I'll leave it at that. That's one track. But the second track is we have to lead by example. We have to show this nation that it's not okay to have two societies. It's not okay to have two Americas. And as this is Passion Week, it's also the week that the state does its annual budget. And the budget states priorities for the year. And I'm going to bring passion to this budget. And I'm going to bring truth to this budget. And I'm not going to allow a budget to be passed that sidesteps the truth and sidesteps the hard decisions. I'm not going to allow us to go forward in denial anymore. And this is the truth. The truth is discrimination is alive and well in America today, and discrimination is alive and well in New York today. That is the truth. How can he say that? The governor of the state saying that? Because it is the truth, my friends. That's why. And because I don't believe in living in the state of denial. You will never solve a problem you are unwilling to admit. Amen. So we have to start with the admission. And discrimination is different. I spent 8 years in the Bill Clinton administration. I was in his cabinet as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. One of the things I did was fair housing discrimination. And I brought thousands of cases. And discrimination is different in different parts of the country. Down south, sometimes you get a brutal form of discrimination. I sued the Ku Klux Klan for their activities down south. They had a TV show where they would sit there in their robes and their pointy hats and just spew hate and venom on TV. I did lawsuits where they still did cross burnings in yards. During that time, we had the black church burnings. I don't know if you remember. It was obvious, it was brutal, it was in your face. New York, we have a different type of discrimination. It's more subtle, but it's more insidious. It's institutionalized, it's culturalized, it's marbleized throughout society. And it's not obvious, but in many ways it's more and more dangerous. They talk about the school to prison pipeline, where children are failed in school and they can't get a job and they wind up in prison, and that's the problem, the school to prison pipeline. It's worse than that, because it starts before school. It's really a home to prison pipeline. It starts before school. It starts in the neighborhood. It starts in the housing complex. And it starts in many times in public housing. 1949, this nation promised every American a safe, clean, decent home. 1949. And that was the genesis of public housing. You walk through public housing today, and you tell me we fulfilled the promise of safe, clean, decent housing. It's a disgrace. You have public housing with no heat, with mold, high rates of asthma. We still have lead paint in our public housing. Lead paint is something we ended in the 60s and the 70s. Lead paint is a poison. A child eats lead paint, ingests it from the dust in the home, it can permanently and irreversibly damage that child. And it's a reality in public housing today. Who runs public housing? It's federally funded, it's locally run. Federally funded. Mr. President said he's going to make America great again. I invite him to come visit NYCHA housing and walk through those housing complexes and tell me, did you make America great again? I've been visiting public housing a lot the past few weeks because this week is all about getting the legislature to act, and I want radical change in public housing. And I wanted to expose the problems in public housing. So I've gone 3 times in just the past couple of weeks. My people came to me and they said, we don't understand why you keep going back to public housing. I said, well, that's because I learned something. I have a brother. His name is Chris. Christopher took the other path in life. Every family has one. He became a reporter. And I learned something from him as a reporter. He's a TV reporter. It's the pictures that matter. Forget the words, they're all talking political blather on TV anymore. Anyway, but it's the pictures. So I keep going back to public housing because I want those pictures on TV, and I want New Yorkers to see how we are having other New Yorkers live. I believe if New Yorkers knew what was going on in public housing, they would not stand for it. We went down to Puerto Rico after the hurricane, when the federal government abandoned Puerto Rico, and they saw the pictures of what was going on in Puerto Rico, and you had New Yorkers from all across the state giving donations and money and whatever they could when they saw the reality. Well, I want them to see the reality in public housing because a lot of it looks a lot like Puerto Rico. And you have terrible conditions in public housing. And that's what we need to expose, and that's what we need to solve this week. And here's my proposal for public housing. No more talking. No more pointing fingers. It's time for action. New York State will pledge $550 million to clean up public housing, which is the largest commitment in the state's history. And it's going to be hard to get passed, and remember why. We have no role, the state, in public housing. It's federal and it's local. There are 150 housing authorities in the state. We don't give any of them significant money. That's federal and that's local. But NYCHA is different. It's a public health emergency. It's a public safety emergency, and we're going to step up and we're going to give them $550 million. But there are 3 conditions. Number 1, I am tired of the politicians defending the bureaucracy of NYCHA rather than protecting the interests of the tenants. We fund public housing not to support the NYCHA bureaucracy, but to actually help the tenants. And NYCHA cannot do it. It takes them 4 years from the day they get the money to spend $1. They're telling people right now, well, you have no heat. It's going to take us 4 years to change your boiler. They're telling the tenants right now, we can't tell you whether or not you have lead paint in the apartment because we don't have people who are trained to do the work. We need a real private company that's going to come in and get the work done and turn the heat on and get the lead out and get the mold out and get it done in real time because we're talking about brothers and sisters who have been living in misery for too long, and it stops now. Second condition is the tenants have to be empowered to be part of the process. It's not about the bureaucracy and the politicians telling the tenants what to do. They have to start listening to the tenants. The tenants are organized in a way they've never been. They went out, they got a lawyer, and they sued the city. God bless them. And I stand 100% with the tenants. And we're going to put the money up, but I want the tenants at the table to make the decisions along with everybody else, and nothing happens without the tenants. And then the third point is it's not just about fixing the buildings. We have to get support services in those buildings. We have to get the services to help people work out the issues that they're dealing with. We have to bring ministry into those buildings and faith into those buildings. There's an organization called MPAC, Mobilizing Preachers and Community. It was my idea. Somebody walks around taking credit for it. But that is an issue within the family, so you stay out of it. But I will handle that. But we're going to spend all this money in public housing. The job opportunities, the wealth opportunities have to go to minority contractors and to the tenants. That's the point. Because it is about economic opportunity. That is the main point. And then, after homes and housing, it is the schools. And here's the painful truth in Passion Week. We have two education systems in this state. Not public-private. We have one for the rich and one for the poor. And you go to a school on the rich side of town, and they will show you all the fancy equipment they have and how they have the children in kindergarten on the internet. And you go to a school on the poor side of town, and they won't even have a basketball net. You go to a school on the rich side of town, and they'll show you all the computers and laptops where they can talk to the parents and they do their homework. You go to a school on the poor side of town, the most sophisticated piece of electronic equipment is the metal detector that you walk through on the way to the classroom. That is the truth. That is the truth about our education system. It's just like this nation. Just like this nation. They talk about income inequality. They're right. It's not that we have a poor nation. We have a rich nation. We have the richest nation on the globe. We have more millionaires and billionaires than ever before. We also have more people in poverty than ever before. It's the distribution of the resources that is the problem. And we have in this state educational inequality. We have inequality in how we distribute the education funding. My position is the money should follow the need. A school in Bedford-Stuyvesant has a different problem than a school on Park Avenue. And the money should follow the need. Truth is, the way we're organized, all they're worried about is getting the money to the bureaucracy. I'm not worried about the bureaucracy. I'm worried about the students who actually need help. I play a game with them now because we don't even know what money goes to what school. We don't even know. I give Buffalo, New York a check. They have 50 schools. I don't know how much they're giving to the 50 schools, how much are given to the rich school, how much are given to the poor school. New York City, $26 billion, 1,600 schools. How much is going to the rich, high-performing school? How much is going to the poor school? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Well, why won't you tell us? It's the largest funding stream in the state of New York. It's the #1 civil rights issue of the new age is education. Let's find out where the money goes, and let's have an honest conversation. You have some students in this state get about $11,000 for their total education. Some students get $33,000 for their education. Where does the money go among those 1,600 schools? What are the poor schools getting? What are the minority schools getting? How does that compare to the rich suburbs? How does that compare to the rural poor schools? Let's have a real honest discussion on education, because this state spends more money on education than any state in the United States of America. And I'm proud of it. We spend more money per pupil than any other state. We spend 2 times the national average. The question is, where does it go and who's getting it? And that's a question they have to answer in this budget this week, or I'm not going to sign a check that gives anyone $1 until we know where that money goes. And education is the key. Proverb 22:6 says, train up a child in the way he should go, even when he is old, he will not depart from it. It is about education, and then it follows to employment discrimination, because if you don't have the right education, you're not going to get one of those great jobs. And you wind up in a minimum wage job that doesn't pay you enough to pay for rent and pay for food. And that's why we just raised the minimum wage from $9 to $15, highest in the United States of America, so people can live. Yeah, we have parts of the economic sector doing great, but we also have the highest unemployment is young minority males, and let's focus on that. I want to give job vouchers and training vouchers to get young people private sector jobs and the training they need to go along with it. We spend $160 billion of government money. We have a program, MWBE, Minority and Women Business Enterprise Program. I want to make sure 30% of that money goes to minority and women-owned businesses, because that's how you build wealth. We have discrimination in the justice system. Lady Justice, the symbol, she wears a blindfold and she holds a scale of justice, meaning that it's supposed to be about the merits. Young person gets into trouble, they show up before the judge. The judge posts cash bail. If you can pay the cash, you walk. If you can't pay the cash because you're poor, you go and you sit in Rikers. How is that justice? It's not supposed to be about how much money you have. I propose a system, no more cash bail. The judge makes a decision on the merits. If he thinks you should stay, you stay. If not, you leave. I don't care if you're white, you're black, you're rich, you're poor. It's justice. It has nothing to do with color of skin. On this pipeline, they then send you to Rikers Island. Rikers Island reminds me of Robben's Island off South Africa, where they kept President Mandela. Right. They send you to the island, and you're forgotten. Yeah. 90% minority. 75% of the people in Rikers Island have not been convicted of anything. Yeah. They're waiting trial. Yeah. Worst jail in the state. More deaths, more assaults than any other jail. It's not even close. Federal government comes in under President Obama, God bless him, and says there are ongoing civil rights violations on Rikers Island, and the federal government comes in and puts a federal monitor in charge because there are civil rights violations. We needed the federal government to tell us here that we had to stop violating people's civil rights and we had to close Rikers. They now come back and say, well, okay, we'll close Rikers. You know how long they want to close Rikers? 10-year plan. 10-year plan. 10 years. That's 2 mayors from now, That's 3 city councils from now. That means a 10-year plan is no plan. It's no plan. It is either gross incompetence to say you can't build a jail in 10 years, or it's a statement that you just don't care. We're building a new airport at LaGuardia Airport. Very complicated. Federal approval, disapproval, everybody's got to approve it. It's going to take 4 years. We built the largest infrastructure project in the United States, a new bridge over the Hudson River. It's going to take 5 years. We're building a new train station at Penn Station. It's going to take 4 years. It can't take you 10 years to build a jail. It can't. Martin Luther King, justice delayed is justice denied. And this is justice denied. Proverbs 31:8-9 says, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Speak up and judge fairly. The young men and women in Rikers deserve their rights and their civil rights, and they deserve to get the support and the education that they were failed by the system. Now, what is the common denominator? Passion Week. What's the common denominator between NYCHA housing and low unemployment and bail and Rikers Island? There's one line that connects all of it. It's all about poor minorities. Do you think if they went to a building with rich and wealthy people and said, by the way, it's going to take us 4 years to put in a boiler, do you think they would survive 11 seconds? Do you think if it was a child of a rich person and a powerful person sitting in Rikers Island, they would have ever taken 10 years as an answer? Yeah. Do you think if it was the children of the wealthy who was sitting out here in one of these public schools that has been failing for 20 years, 20 years, generation after generation, do you think it would be tolerated? Of course not. Because it is a tale of two cities. And it is a tale of two Americas. And that's what this fight is about. That's what this struggle is about. Martin Luther King said, the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. He did not mean it automatically bends. He meant that our activism can bend the arc, but it is a struggle. It is going to require us to do it. It's not going to happen on its own. I'm going to go argue for this budget. I'll tell you what's going to happen. They're all about protecting the bureaucracy. They don't want to disrupt NYCHA, and they don't want to disrupt the Rikers bureaucracy, and they don't want to disrupt the education bureaucracy. The people need to stand up and speak. We like to think that politicians lead. No. People lead. Politicians follow. You see what happened yesterday on guns. You see those people standing up and marching and making their voices heard. The politicians heard them. The politicians heard them. And I think we have finally loosened the grasp of the NRA on the politicians in Washington. But it's about the people. It's about the people. It is about people standing up. I know it's been a long struggle. Galatians 6:9, let us not grow weary of doing good, for a new season we will reap if we do not give up. I need you. I need you to stand up and say, I'm not tolerating two Americas. I'm not tolerating two New Yorks anymore. We're going to fight the fight in Washington, but we're going to improve the plight at home in the meantime. And we're going to show this nation what justice for all means, and opportunity for all means, and community of all means. We're going to take social justice and make it a reality. And while we're cursing the darkness in Washington, we're going to light a candle here in New York. And we're going to say, New York, is the light. Don't tell us we can't do it. Don't tell us we can't make Martin Luther King's dream a reality. Don't tell me we can't make Mario Cuomo's quest for social justice a reality. Don't tell me we can't listen to our better angels. I know we can, because we do in a state of New York. And that's our mission. And that's our mission together. Thank you and God bless you.